Cha.
Employed?
You don't go out looking for a job dressed like that, do you? On a weekday?
Is this what day is this?
A couple words just so I can make sure that I can hear you.
Hello, hello, hello. Happy Sunday to the world.
Oh, thank goodness, because that was actually only one word repeated.
Oh, yeah. That makes the waveform look weird.
Yeah. Also, it's Monday. I've had that happen before,
it's
actually.
Monday.
Well, it is. Yeah, I know. Who saw it coming? Shelley Brisbane is here with us, everybody. Shelley Brisbane, host of Parallels. I can't remember. I'm so awful.
No, without the S.
Okay, but there's no the. I know that. Leave off the the for those the other guys. So, switching stuff up this week. Ooh, in ways that people don't even know about yet. But they're going to find out about one right now. Normally on Monday, what we do on this show is it is news to whomever happens to be on the show. Like Shelley Brisbane is on this week, so I'd say, hey, Shelley, what's news to you? But we're interrupting that thing for this other thing. Because the reason I wanted to have Shelley on this week was something that I saw her say on Twitter. Apple, of course, well, let me back up. Last week, I guess it was Thursday, was Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. It's the 10th one of those.
Oh, okay, cool. And then Apple, a couple of days before that, made some announcements like, hey, we're doing our Today at Apple sessions. We're doing ASL, and we're also doing BSL sessions. It was starting off with iPad and starting off with iPhone, I think. I thought that was going to be a thing they were doing from then on. It turns out that was for Global Accessibility Awareness Day, but it did part of what that day is supposed to do, which is raise awareness. They then, I guess it was Wednesday, or maybe it was Thursday, maybe it was on the day itself, they came out with a whole slew of things that are coming, accessibility features that are coming. And I didn't automatically think, oh, I want to talk to Shelley because, accessibility stuff. Where I wanted to talk to Shelley was when Shelley said, wow, I have wanted Apple to say stuff like this for so long. Glad to finally see it. And that was the thing that made me want to call on Shelley. So tell me what it was that Apple did last week that turned you on, both in terms of what are some of the features coming that you're most turned on by, but then talk to me about the messaging itself.
Apple always recognizes Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I mean, a lot of big companies do, and that's the success of the people who organize it, who are a couple of accessibility advocates. And Apple will usually rearrange things on the website, which is always the derisive way I put it, or in the App Store, and they'll say, here's a bunch of accessibility apps that have been there for a while, but look, we featured them, which is not a bad thing. But it's also not, this is something new. This is, hey, we know it's GAAD, or God, as some people say, hashtag GAAD. But our response to it is going to be to take our content that's focusing on accessibility and highlight it. And they do it for all sorts of other commemorative type events like that. And, that's fine. I think some people give Apple and other companies that do this a little more credit than is worthy. What they did this year, though, was pre-announce or preview actual new features that are coming to the Watch and to iOS later this year. Something, if you follow Apple, they almost never do. Like at WWDC, which isn't even till next month, you'll often get a pretty good glimpse of what's coming in the next iOS. But first of all, they don't pre-announce that stuff. And second of all, to focus specifically on accessibility features is pretty unusual. So I just felt like, in my, cynical, curmudgeonly way, I felt like I needed to come out of that box and get on Twitter and say, hey, Apple for once has done something in terms of their messaging specifically that I think is pretty great. And to be honest, like it mirrors something that companies like Microsoft and Google have been doing, which is previewing accessibility stuff. Google has even in their Android operating system decoupled accessibility updates with their Android updates. So in other words, Android 12 will be out this fall, but the accessibility updates come to Android before that. That's neither here nor there in terms of whether that's a good thing. It just means that you're not burying all the accessibility stories inside all the Android stories. And it helps people that focus on accessibility do that. And whether Apple does that or not, again, it's just a different strategy. But it happens at this time of year because Google I/O and Microsoft Build both happened this month. So this was kind of a big month for accessibility announcements.
You say, you wanted to come out of your curmudgeonly or cynical box for a second, but I kind of want to take us back there.
Okay.
Well, I mean, is this something that's happening because Apple feels like they got a lock on this now, and so they can go ahead and say, here's some of the stuff that we're doing because nobody's going to catch up? Are they doing it because Google and Microsoft are doing it as well? I mean, is it part of the whole the wild card? I've heard people talk about it. That is, sort of what's going on legally at this point, like in DC and the EU and things like that. I mean, what inspires the change? Do you suppose?
Well, and this is, of course, speculation because Apple doesn't bother to tell me why they're doing what they're doing. I think it is more motivated by what the other companies are doing, because if they just wanted to sort of straight good PR vibes, they probably would have doubled down. And they did a lot of sort of feel-good accessibility stuff like what I talked about, where they're, focusing on accessibility content, and they're doing stuff that is actually useful to people, like the sign time thing, where you can get a sign language interpreter to assist you with your Apple Store needs. Right. And that's a real thing. It's not a feature in the operating system. But I think the fact that Microsoft and Google have also both been really good lately at deploying their new accessibility features as innovation points. So instead of just saying, we're making this thing more accessible by fixing why it doesn't work for a blind person or a person who's hard of hearing, we're actually using AI or machine learning or whatever to provide an accessibility feature. And the kinds of features that Apple talked about last week are of that type. So, for example, they have this thing called Assistive Touch for Apple Watch, and Assistive Touch is a feature that's been on iOS. It basically makes it possible for people with motor disabilities to interact with the watch without having to touch the watch. So there's new gestures that you can do with your hand by clenching your fingers and clenching your hand. And that's innovative stuff. That's not even, that's a great feature for somebody who has that disability. But it's also a pretty innovative use of the gyroscope and the accelerometer that already exist in the watch.
Mm-hmm. What else did they announce that revved your motor?
Well, they're supporting bi-directional hearing aids. So in the past, when you used a hearing aid, the microphone that you would use if you're on a phone call, would be your device's microphone. Well, that's not great if you're not holding your iPhone. But now there are new hearing aids that have microphones included. And so Apple is supporting them, which is probably something that was going to come anyway. It's just nice that it's part of this package. For people like me who have low vision, they're making an app-by-app text size and display options. I'll be more interested when more third-party apps support dynamic type, but the more Apple does to sort of make deeper cuts with this kind of feature, I feel like there's more pressure on app developers to support it, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Is this a thing that Apple can do system-wide, or are they just saying, all right, we'll make it so that every developer can do it? And by the way, developers, this is a thing that you can do and may want to consider. Yeah,
I figure it's like that. I'm not certain because I don't know exactly how they're doing it. And to be honest, it's not something that cried out to me before, although, different apps use fonts in different ways. And so there's some apps that just natively have smaller type. And so the question is Apple making it possible, if the app developer doesn't support dynamic type, to contravene that? That's probably not the case. It's probably just a matter of, hey, developers, here's the thing we're doing. Please get on the train because people like this feature and that sort of thing. Right. It's interesting to hear you, because I'm horrible about keeping up with what's going on with other operating systems. I mean, what I do is Apple stuff, right? I mean, if something breaks through, I would be happy to talk about it, but I can't imagine how it could break through because I, focus so much on Apple and what it is that Apple does. Is there one platform? Well, I mean, there are only two platforms as far as phones are concerned, but as far as Mac and Windows or iOS and Android, is anyone in particular winning? Is there one area where somebody is doing better than everyone else, or is everybody coming along at the same speed, or is it just like buying a phone? You buy the phone you like and then hope for what you got when you got it. It really matters what kind of accessibility features you need. Mm-hmm. Now, for example, Windows is way ahead in terms of the kinds of customization for people with low vision, whether it's high contrast or text recognition or rather text formatting to adjust size to what people need. It's also really smart about turning a web page into something somebody can use based on the operating system preferences, which Apple doesn't do at all in any of its platforms. By the same token, if you're a Braille user, iOS is the platform you want versus Android. So you really have, and this is unfortunate because you really have to, as a person with an accessibility issue, need to know what each of those platforms does to be able to choose effectively. And there are some people for whom Mac OS is not the right platform if they have a certain kind of low vision need where they want to have a lot of granular control of high contrast and text options. But for other people, the Mac is a perfect platform because the way the graphical user interface looks is very consistent and very predictable. And so it's, the fact that we have more options these days as far as looking at the platform in real time and saying, hey, let me test this out is kind of the only thing that makes it possible to make a decision like that. Having said that, I feel like Microsoft is coming on really strong, especially on the desktop side, interestingly enough. On the mobile side, Apple continues to lead, and Android is, they're doing innovative stuff. I think Apple is, like I say, they're doing things now that aren't so much adding to the basic accessibility stack, if you will, but they're finding ways to use their machine learning and their other technology innovations that are outside of accessibility to turn into accessibility features. Like last year when they added LiDAR-based accessibility features to the iPhone 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max. So any device that has LiDAR does this people detection thing, which makes it possible for you, if you're a blind person, to determine whether there's a person nearby and how far they are from you. And then one of the new features that they announced is eye tracking on the iPad, so that somebody who is who uses a face-mounted, head-mounted device to communicate with their device can actually use iOS. In the past, they've been able to use Mac or Windows, and so it actually adds to the number of people who can use iOS. And Apple keeps doing that stuff. And I think some people who have used it for a long time, used accessibility features on Apple devices for a long time, might be like, well, wait, when are they going to beef up VoiceOver for the Mac, which is a fair question, but they're doing a lot of other things as well. So they're not doing 100% as fast or as deeply as I would want them to, but they are making a lot of cool additions to what they already do.
So the messaging change that happened this week, and I don't want to say change that happened this week, but, well, do you expect to see this kind of messaging going forward? Or is this going to be as soon as, Google announces something and Microsoft announces something, then we'll say, oh, here's the stuff that we're doing too. I mean, do you expect this kind of openness going forward, you personally, or is this hey, remember that year they did that? We're saying 3 years from now.
I honestly feel like it's a little bit of a test from them, because while I do think it's motivated by the other companies out there, I feel like the reaction to this and whether basically they get any play, whether it be in the press or whether it be in the accessibility community, is going to help them understand that there's some value in it. It may not go beyond sort of niche areas like accessibility. We may not be getting 5-year roadmaps, which Microsoft often does. It's very unlikely that will happen, in my opinion. But I feel like this isn't just, Microsoft is on our heels this year, because this has kind of been going on for 3 or 4 years now. I feel like it's an ongoing thing. And so whether it's because they feel competition coming at them, or whether it's because there's been so much criticism of how uncommunicative they've been with the accessibility community, it feels like it has benefits for them. And I honestly, I hope they continue it. And that's why I tweeted what I did, because I'm not somebody who, despite the fact that I use and love Apple products, I'm not somebody who jumps out in front and just, gives them credit for the sake of doing it so that Apple will love me. I don't, that's not the way I operate. But I felt like they needed the positive reinforcement, whether they read my tweet or not. I don't have any illusions about that. But it felt like there needed to be some reinforcement for the fact that their Global Accessibility Day announcements were not just about cosmetic changes to their presentation. I felt like they made some decisions about substantively explaining new features that are going to have benefits not only for their PR, because it absolutely will have benefit for their PR, but also for the ability of people who have disabilities to plan whether these are devices that they want to invest their money in.